the same logic that results in your fire alarm going off
That's right.
when you burn toast, which is a fire alarm that goes off for burnt toast can still save your life. One that assumes that a lot of smoke is toast related may miss an actual fire and you may get trapped by it. So your fight or flight reflex is built to be oversensitive, and to the extent that there are algorithmic reasons to trigger it because it gets you very engaged, and that serves someone's economic interests, it causes us all to be jerked around when, I mean, let's put it this way. You describe yourself as being interested in correctly navigating issues of what we might otherwise call diversity, equity, and inclusion without getting involved in what we recognize as the culture war.
Mm-hmm.
You are not absolutely alone in this quadrant.
Right.
You are friends with Chloe Valdery, so she's a
Indeed.
mutual friend of ours. And I would say that you are both interested in figuring out, sorting the wheat from the chaff in this area, rather than just pretending that there is no issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? And I share that belief with you. There is something to be navigated, and unfortunately, both poles are wrong about it. It's not that we don't have a problem, right? But it is also not that white supremacy is ubiquitous in America and the West, and it has to be stamped out along with patriarchy and all of those false assertions. Go
I
ahead.
have to, yeah. Well, this the constant refrain of white supremacy. Um, it's so sad for all kinds of reasons, but one of the big reasons for me is that, first of all, my family are refugees from Uganda in East Africa. We were booted out by a Black man, Idi Amin, who decided that Africa belongs only to Blacks. Well, guess what, folks? My family had been in Uganda for 3 generations. We did not know any other country. We did not have a passport to India or a passport to Britain. Uganda was our country. But the very legitimate aspiration to liberation in the various African colonies devolved, as aspirations often do, into a fever called Pan-Africanism. And that is when you get the dogma, and dogma by definition is exclusionary. So no wonder that a military dictator could tell other people of color, you do not belong here. And part of what is so frustrating for somebody who has been born in a completely different segment of the world, coming to the United States, is that even those who decry Western imperialism or who castigate others for, quote, centering whiteness, they themselves don't recognize that these impulses to exclude are human. They are endemically human. And that if you're going to go around preaching to others to check their bias, the question becomes, what bias of yours are you checking? Role model that. Show that. And that's, again, not what we see. So in a way, Brett, I feel like this whole cultural moment, sort of focusing on diversity, equity, inclusion, and the like, is missing something huge, a huge opportunity. And the opportunity is this. Right now, it's as if there are 2 rival teams on the field. One used to wear the jersey called powerful, and the other used to wear the uniform labeled powerless. Now, those jerseys are being swapped out, okay? They're being traded, but you have the same game. We have the opportunity right now to change the us against them game through diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that is not what we are doing. We're replicating the game.
Right. We are replicating the game. It's not as if this isn't a known pattern. I mean, I sort of
Right.
feel like there are places where the right lesson is encoded, right? There are things you will find in Orwell that are absolutely central to our moment. You know, The Who covered this particular one, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. And the idea is we have this tendency to valorize the oppressed, which is understandable. But the problem is, your point is exactly right. There is a quadrant of human nature that acts in a particular way based on its opportunities once it gains power. And so, to the extent that we view the oppressed as more deserving, they may be more deserving, but at the point that you transfer who's powerful to them, they behave in the same ways. Because guess what? This had nothing to do with their particular genes creating particular defects of cognition. This has to do with game theory. The powerful tend to behave this way unless you build systems in which it doesn't pay. If you build those systems, we can behave much better. And many of us have seen that world. We have lived in these circumstances where, frankly, race has been sidelined, and we've seen how well it works. And it's very frustrating to have the functional world that we might live in prototyped all around the landscape. But when it comes time to say, actually, here's how we ought to structure things so that race is not a dominant predictor of your well-being, for example, we end up shouted down by those who are playing a game that, whether they are cynical, the game is cynical, right?
Yes,
It is about
exactly.
leveraging power in order to get limited resources, you know, making hay while the sun shines. And this is, you know, this was a disaster 100 years ago, but it's actually an existential threat now, because if you play that game in a world where people are as thoroughly armed as they are, and in which these tendencies are so amplified by technologies that we did not evolve with, this is going to result in this being a very short ride. So we have a limited amount of time to fix this. It's not like, you know, we can go through another couple genocides and then figure it out. Actually, the time is now.
Right.